Why don't people leave the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Latter-day Saint Church, the LDS Church, or the Mormon Church? These are some of the names that are used to refer to the mainstream Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Why don't people leave? Why do people stay? I've thought about this question a lot. For myself, I have my own journey of coming out of Mormonism, and it took a very, very long time to do. So I've thought about this question over and over and over again. It took me 8 years to leave the Mormon Church once I knew intellectually that the church was not true. I consider myself an intellectual person. That doesn't necessarily means I'm better than other people or more successful than other people or anything like that. No, it just means that I think about things a lot. Things have to make sense in my head a lot. And it took me 8 years to leave the Mormon Church once I found out the church was not true. And when I say true, I want to specify not literally true. On some symbolic level, perhaps there's some true elements in the teachings. You could find that in lots of different places, but Mormonism might have some, actually, in my opinion, they do have certain elements of symbolism and teachings and maxims and whatnot that can be used to better one's life, even though they're not literally true, even though they are taught by the church as if they are. In my journey in knowing that the church was not literally true, it took me another 4 years to stop going to church. And I think about that a lot. Why did it take me so long? Now, in this whole time frame, I was trying to rationalize with myself how the church could maybe not be literally true, because that had passed, that ship had sailed. I could no longer believe the church was literally true. I had read too many things, and a lot of those things were inconsistencies and whitewashing of history, a clear cover-up, if you will, of certain doctrines and histories and teachings that I hadn't known before. And once I became aware of these things, I could no longer literally believe it was true. But emotionally, I was so tied in to the church that it took me another 4 years to stop going to church. I was trying to rationalize in my heart and soul and mind how it could work. And then it took me another 4 years to leave the church. I felt it was very important for me to symbolically and formally leave the Mormon church. I did not want to be affiliated with a church that I believed causes a lot of damage to people. I'm not saying all of Mormonism causes damage. There are some good things in Mormonism, but the church as a whole, in my view, causes more damage than good. And so I left. And so I want to talk today about why some people leave and some people don't leave. I think that to the chagrin of a lot of, if you call them anti-Mormons, I don't know how I feel about that word. I actually kind of don't like that word. They're just trying to share how Mormonism isn't true. That doesn't mean they're anti-Mormon people. They just, I suppose they don't believe in the Mormon church, but it shouldn't be whether you're pro-Mormon or anti-Mormon. It should be whether the church is true or not true, or if the church does good for people or if it does bad for people. Anti or pro kind of separate people into classes. You're either for us or you're against us, and they don't really take into account whether something is true or good or not. And so there is a lot of issues that a Mormon has to deal with as they are deciding on mainly an unconscious level whether to stay or to leave. And I have to say, in my own process of leaving, a lot of what I was going through was unconscious, and it didn't come to my conscious awareness till later. I believe that the mind and the soul and the heart are merciful in that something will not come to your conscious awareness until you are psychologically and emotionally ready to handle it. Or it might come to your conscious awareness, but then your defenses will quickly push it back down. Some people refer to this as a shelf, where they just will place any doubts on a shelf. And some people, the shelf stays intact, and other people, the shelf breaks. And I know for me, my shelf definitely broke. So why are some people able to put things on a shelf and have them stay on the shelf, and other people have their shelf break? I believe that it's a complex issue, but there are some certain factors involved. One is, how much does a person value truth? I have come to realize for myself that a lot of LDS people don't value truth as much as they say that they do. I even feel that same way about society. A lot of people that say they value truth or they value some particular thing, they say that they believe in truth, but they really don't. It's not their top priority. I'm not saying that they don't believe in truth, but it's a lower priority for them than for other people. And I think people that tend to leave the Mormon church have a sense of desiring truth more than another Mormon person would. And I think that's a big factor. That's a big factor why some people stay and some people leave, is the person's desire to know the truth, whether it's easy or whether it's hard, whether it's painful. They don't care. They value the truth. While other people, they say they value the truth, and I think they actually convince themselves that they value the truth, and on some level they do value truth. But it's not the most important thing. Some people value security and comfort over truth. That is within Mormonism. It is in the world at large. People will give up their freedom and their independence in order to feel secure, safe, and they feel comfort. So that is a big reason why a lot of Mormons will not leave. A lot of times, it's harder for someone that is born into the Mormon church to leave as opposed to a convert to disaffiliate with the church, because the convert understands what life was like before Mormonism. The person born into the church does not. Every aspect of the person's identity is through the lens of Mormonism. That person has put in so much time and so much effort without even really having a choice in the matter. They're born into it. Their family decides who they are. And on a certain level, this is normal for every culture. You're born in a certain race or a certain country or a certain culture, and you don't really have any choice in the matter. That's who you are. But the difference is, in Mormonism, there's a lot of levels of control, and the person at every step of the way is infused with Mormonism at every developmental level. And the person knows deep down, if I challenge this, church, I'm risking giving up my identity, who I am. I may give up my family. I may have to give up my friends. I may have to give up my colleagues. I may lose my livelihood. All of those things are so powerful. I could lose my salvation. I could lose my exaltation. Exaltation is the process of becoming a god. Mormons believe that you can become a god one day. And they'd have to give up that belief. They'd have to admit that they, on some level, were foolish for believing in this. And they don't want to do that. At a very core, deep level, they don't want to do that. It's too hard. It's too painful. And I think the church does a great job of infusing Mormonism into every single aspect of development, so that they get a Mormon person to buy in and to commit to Mormonism almost every step of the way. And when there is a point where someone becomes an adult and they start to question, is this religion true or not? Oftentimes, it's not too late, but it's a huge uphill battle where I think a lot of people on a subconscious, unconscious level decide, I'm not going to challenge it. I'm going to work with it. And the church, in a certain sense, wins because the person has been compromised. It's really not about whether the church is true or good anymore. It's about survival, emotional survival. And that's why a lot of people don't leave. I believe that there are a lot of individuals that sit in the pews every Sunday that deep in their heart, they know that the church is not true. They know it. If they were an adult and they had never been affiliated with the Mormon church, most of them, this is my belief, would never have joined. They would have said, there is no way I'm believing this. If they had all of the information and they looked at it carefully, I don't really think it would take long for them to decide, I'm not believing in this. But they can't admit that out loud because they are so compromised. Their identity is so infused with Mormonism. Their children, their spouse, their family, their friends, their colleagues, etc., etc., etc. They can't admit that to themselves. So they have to go along with it. It's not about if the church is true or not. This person does not care as much if the church is true. They care about security. They care about safety. and they care about comfort. They want to avoid humiliation, because everybody that comes out of the church, there's a period of humiliation. How could I have believed in this? How could I have been so blind? Perhaps I was born into it and there was a lot of pressure, yes, but I could have challenged it earlier and I didn't. That person doesn't want to face that. They don't want to face that. And it's on a deep, deep psychological and emotional level. They might not, I would say most of them probably aren't even consciously aware of it, because if they were consciously aware of it, it would cause them great distress. And eventually they'd have to make a decision. But somewhere deep in their psyche, they pushed it down. They don't want to face it. They're going to go along with it. The person that leaves, it is my belief, and I'm not judging harshly, a person that leaves is likely to be more intellectually honest with themselves than someone who stays. In order to leave, you have to not believe in it anymore. On an intellectual level, you have to say, this is not true. This is made up. Someone made this up. And I could go into the motives of why they made it up in another video, another audio, and you could decide for yourselves if you believe that or not. But you have to intellectually not believe it anymore. And the second thing is, you have to emotionally and culturally not fit in with it. I think a lot of ways where the church hooks people is through the culture and the emotional bond that people have with other Mormons. I personally never fit in with Mormon people very much. I'm not saying I didn't have Mormon friends, and I still have great admiration for a lot of Mormon people, but I never really fit in with the culture. And I think a lot of the reason why I stayed was a belief in the whitewashed version of what the church was telling me, and the emotional pull and the emotional tactics at which the church used to keep me from questioning those principles. You must have both. You must, at your core, not fit into the culture, not emotionally tie into it. There's something off. There's something wrong. You're not fitting in this culture. I believe in my heart, and I'm going to criticize, but I hope it comes across as not criticizing too harshly. I believe that just as much as there is an intellectual dishonesty among Mormon people, there is an emotional dishonesty as well. They don't want to look. They don't want to find out if the church is not true. They don't want to go there. They risk too much. They are picking, instead of freedom and liberty and responsibility, which would increase their development as an adult, they are choosing safety, comfort, and security. And you will find that all throughout the world, people will choose safety, comfort, and security over freedom, liberty, and responsibility. There are individuals that are like that. And I do not want to come across as if freedom, liberty, and responsibility are easy. They're very, very, very hard. Very hard. I'm not going to promise someone that if they come out of the church, it's going to be easy. It's not easy. It's really, really hard. And in fact, a lot of times, it's lonely. You lose a lot of things. You lose the connection with your family that you once had. Even though you may still have a relationship with your family in a certain way, it's not the same anymore. You lose that. You might lose out on connections with friends, colleagues, associates. And I know I keep harping on that again and again, and I may sound like a broken record or broken drum, however that saying is. But that's the crux of the issue. That's what you're giving up. And it's hard. It's not something that should be made flippantly. And I think a lot of Mormons, they go through the process of challenging the belief system in their own mind, intellectually and emotionally, and they come up with some compromise where they can stay. Because the costs are just too high. They're able to do enough to just justify just enough to where they can stay and not feel too much distress about it. Now, before I end my audio, I want to give credit to a woman, and I believe it was at an ex-Mormon Foundation conference, although I can't say for sure. I didn't personally go to this conference, but I heard it on YouTube. And if I ever find it, I will put it in the description of my audio to give her credit for what she said. She was the one that told me that in order to leave the Mormon church, you must intellectually not believe it anymore. And secondly, you must not like the culture anymore. Or you may respect some things about the culture and the teachings, but you view them as more harm than good. I think that's a nicer way to say that. I don't want to give the impression that I disavow every single thing in Mormonism culturally or intellectually. But I wanted to give her credit. So anyone listening to this, I hope that this was helpful in terms of understanding why people stay and why people leave the church.